Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Salem. And tonight I wanted to continue our discussion, which we began last night, on pagan themes in video games and movies from Japan. And I wanted to pick up on a comment from Teufelsstaub, who talks about a Japanese movie called Onmyaji, which apparently draws upon a traditional Japanese form of divination and uses it as the basis of a modern, I guess we would call it a horror film. And this is the kind of thing that you do see commonly in Japanese cinema, traditional pagan beliefs adapted to modern genres. And it does not make those original beliefs any less respectable in the society, rather it's a fantasy story based upon them. And I think that this is something that one would expect to see in any given pagan society in different ways. Now, personally, my favorite Japanese film of this sort is Kwaidan, which was made in the early 1960s off of a collection of traditional Japanese ghost stories which had been published by Lafcadio Hearn. And I find that this is one of the most haunting films I've ever seen for a number of reasons, the first of which is the sensibility of the stories themselves, which I find have a much greater appeal to my understanding in terms of how I see the spiritual world, certainly than the average Western horror film. There are a collection of Japanese stories within Kwaidan, of which, in my opinion, the most memorable is Oichi the Earless One, and they're filmed in an incomparable visual style, which, in my opinion, I think that once you've seen it, you will not soon forget it. So I highly recommend Kwaidan. And this touches upon another theme which is germane to this topic, and that is that when we're talking about horror films, and by extension any film or any entertainment genre, what appeals to people who are thoroughly pagan and what affects people who are thoroughly pagan is different from what affects people whose primary worldview is Christian. And this came up for me some years ago around the film The Exorcist. And my adopted sister, who was raised Christian and became my adopted sister as an adult, found this film very frightening. My niece, who has always been pagan, watched the same film and couldn't understand what all the fuss was about. By the way, I had pretty much the same reaction to it myself. Why was this reaction? Well, you know, the whole idea of possession and demons and so forth is not part of our worldview. Therefore, it's not an effective horror film for us, because it really doesn't touch on anything that we actually think about. A film like Kwaidan, on the other hand, which primarily revolves around ideas of ghosts and nature spirits, as very much more affecting to the pagan mentality. And this is something I think we'll see more of in the future, a difference in how we look at this sort of thing. Now, personally, I find horror films to be perfectly acceptable because I think that they speak to a part of our psyche that is important to deal with. And the whole idea of horror films, in my opinion, is, at least in part, that you face certain fears in a safe environment and transcend them. I think also in some cases they're structured in such a way as to convey moral lessons, although here again depends entirely on the culture they come from and entirely what that lesson is, if it's something that contemporary pagans would regard as a moral lesson. So these are some of my thoughts on the subject, and I guess that's really all for tonight, and until next time, may you blessed be. But wait, don't forget our books, Witch School First, Second, and Third Degree, and also Living the Wicked Life, and Ritual in Theory and Practice, available at a bookstore near you, or get them direct from us at www.witchschoolstore.com.